You're watching Shaw Spotlight, broadcasting here from Nanaimo, BC, and I'm very happy because, well, for the next 10 or 15 minutes, we're going to talk about beer, but, a little bit of an angle on it. Coming up shortly here in Nanaimo will be the Nanaimo Craft Beer Society Nanaimo Craft Beer Week. That's the fourth version of that, taking place September 20th to 24th. And we've got one of the key figures in Nanaimo Craft Beer Week today. She is an academic, she's a home brewer, and she's the president of the Nanaimo Craft Beer Society. Very happy to welcome to the Shaw Studios. Hello, Dr. Marie Hopwood.
Hello, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Very happy to have you here, again, just talking about beer. So first off, before we talk about what we have going on here and more about Craft Beer Week, tell me about what's your position up at Vancouver Island University?
I am currently chair of the Department of Anthropology, and I'm an archaeologist, and I have the awesome job of doing archaeologies of beer. So that's what I use to make my excavations relevant to people.
Well, archaeology of beer might speak about the beers I've got way in the back of my fridge. I might need some help with that. But from an academic point of view, how does beer fit into archaeology?
Beer is one of the most amazing social artifacts ever. It goes way back in time, maybe even to 13,000 BCE. It is probably as old, if not older, than bread in terms of the first things that people are actually making and then writing about. So. And all the first brewers were all women. So it's a fun thing.
And is this beer, was this the sort of thing associated, again, going back to the age of Todd Jones goalie pads, I think also from about that age. Is there a certain part of the world where the early brewing was sort of centered on?
We used to think it was just Mesopotamia, and that's where the Midas Touché comes into play. That was the first beer that I did with Love Shack Libations and one of my former students, Melissa Ailing. That's a combination hybrid beer of Mesopotamia and Egyptian evidence. So we thought that was all coming from Mesopotamia first. Now we're actually learning that, like language, it's coming up independently in different places. So the Zhuhu Ryu is our Neolithic Chinese beer coming out of the Yellow River area of China. We have also the chicha, which is the chosen chicha, that's inspired by things coming out of the Inca and before the Inca Empire, the Wari Empire in what's now Peru. And so that's kind of what we're finding is that it didn't start in Mesopotamia, which is now like Turkey, Iraq, Syria. It didn't start there and then spread across the world. It's coming independently in different places.
So I would imagine too, of course, back then you didn't have beer ingredients the same ways you do now, the classic hops, water, malt, that sort of thing. So in front of us here, we've got some, what looks like it could be my dinner if I'm really quick. But what are some of the things here? So these are some of the ingredients that have gone into these beers?
Definitely. And like you said, people are using whatever they have. They're not even necessarily all using barley. We do see emmer wheat, einkorn, and barley in Mesopotamia and some parts of Africa. But other places like the Chinese beer, it was originally rice-based. So we have that happening there. And then people are using the ingredients they have around them. So the Blood of My Enemies is our Aztec-inspired beer, and that has some of these ancho chilies in there. We try to make it red. Red is apparently hard to do naturally, but it does give a nice kick in the back of the throat.
So these are actually like ground down and included within the brewing process?
The big ones, we just, I spend hours literally, well not hours, but anyway, I rip them up and I toss them into the boil, and so I just don't touch my eyes for a long time after that. So these are the anchos, but we have other different chilies in there as well. This one is one of my favorites. These are the dried dates, and I don't even have the beer here. This is for our A Date with Dynasty. It's our fully Egyptian-inspired beer. The dates are added in what we call the kind of dry hopped with dates. They're added during a couple first days into fermentation. And the crazy thing with this beer, there's also a nut blend spice called dukkha that's added to it in the dry hop phase. When you first taste it before it's fermented, it has almost a nutty flavor to it. By the time you get it in the bottle, the natural yeasts from these dates will make it into a lemon citrus forward beer. It's craziness. I love it.
All right, and what about this, which looks like stole from my firewood or something like that?
Yep.
So yeah,
Birch bark. So you want the white side is the pretty side. So this is Birch Bark, and it's actually donated to us from the wonderful people at Rocky Lakes Birch Company out in Manitoba. They send us, they laugh all the time. They go out into their forest and they strip off a whole bunch of the birch bark and send it to us for free to use in the beer. And that is for Odin's eye. Odin's Eye is inspired by the egg-fed woman burial, where it was a massive oaken coffin, a whole oaken log that they split, and then she was buried in there. And the last thing they put in was a small birch bark container that had residues on the inside. We were able to do some analysis on that and see that it was a beer, and that beer had birch bark in it. It had honey, meadowsweet, yarrow, and a whole bunch of other botanicals that we don't normally think of as going into beer, but it did.
So you mentioned you've had a chance then through all this research to find these ancient recipes from different parts around the world. Brewed them together here with Dave Paul from Love Shack Libations in Qualicum Beach. So my question is then, how do these taste dramatically different from like the standard beers you'll get in the liquor store these days?
Yes, the short version is yes. So the Who Are You, it tends to taste almost a little bit more like a dry cherry cider, and it's magenta. It has a lot of hibiscus in it, so it is pink. Then the Odin's Eye, after having this, you'll have an idea what the flavor profile of birch is. And it has a kind of a mineral forwardness to it. And it will look very dark, but it tastes almost like a slight sour. And so they're all very, very different. The closest thing to a standard beer is probably the Midas Touché. And even that one, it's gonna be different because it's called Midas for a reason. It's a king's ransom worth of saffron. But again, from what we actually think is the tomb of Midas in Gordian, he was buried with a whole bunch of bronze vessels, and the inside had all these yellow residues. And we think that was from the saffron that they were using in the beer for him as well.
Very cool. All right, well now we've sort of talked all about these intriguing flavors. As part of Nanaimo Craft Beer Week that we talked about earlier, there's going to be an opportunity for folks to try and learn about these beers.
Yes.
It's a session that you are leading.
Yes, and so I'm very excited for this. We haven't done this since COVID and quarantine shut things down. This will be our first time back with that. We will have probably all 6 of our beers. There's one that's a little bit problematic right now because there's some global shortages happening with some of the ingredients. But it'll be Dave Paul from Love Shack Libations, myself. I have Melissa Ailing, one of my former students, who's now a grad student at SFU. And some of my current students will be talking about the archaeology behind it and serving samples of these beers with food as well.
Perfect. All right, and that event's called Raise a Glass to the Past, which I believe you've got your own custom glassware as well up there. So folks will be able to chance to come in, try these beers out. And again, that's taking place, Tuesday, September the 20th, I believe, at Vancouver Island University. We'll throw the graphic on the screen here. NanaimoCraftBeerSociety.com is where people can buy tickets for that. But as part of the week, you're also hosting another event as well, and that's sort of your ladies' night. So tell us about that.
It is the ladies' night. So that's the Ninkasi Speakeasy, and we have that tasting glass here as well. Ninkasi was an original or an early Mesopotamian goddess that was all about beer and fermentation, but also women's health. And so the Ninkasi Beer Society or Brew Club, that was a women's home brew club. And so we started out with women wanting to learn about how to make beer. The first brewers were all women, but it became something where if you didn't have the beard and the flannel, you couldn't do it. And so we've kind of revived that a bit for ourselves, but also wanted to make beer drinking accessible to women as well. So make it low key, make it really fun. We're gonna have some tasting elements there in terms of actually tasting the malt that goes into the beers. All of our beers are either brewed by or inspired by women. So it is a ladies' night. So ladies, come on out.
You talk about the beard and the flannel, of course, being the classic sort of craft beer look, right? And so, it can certainly be exclusive in that way. So this is obviously a way to get more women involved in learning about beer. How did you sort of get an interest in craft beer in the first place?
I was dragging my now boyfriend to all these wineries in grad school. And so I thought that wasn't fair to always go to the wineries. And so I started taking him to some breweries and I fell in love with it. I thought I didn't like beer before because I thought all beer tasted like mass-produced Pilsners and Kolsch's, which now, as you have shown me, there are good versions of these styles as well. But I liked the beers that were more funky. I liked the deep, dark stouts. I liked the sours. And that's kind of what we're hitting on here for the Ninkasi Speakeasy as well. Nothing is standard. They're all different versions. They're unique and funky and really fun. The beers we're sourcing for that. Yeah.
So the women, if they get tickets and sign up here for this Ninkasi beer event, what do you hope they take away from that from the event, from the experience?
That, for one thing, that beer is accessible and that beer is delicious. Beer tastes like many other things, not just that standard mass-produced that sometimes we think of. Nothing wrong with that, but there's a lot more to it as well. And then it can be a fun ladies' night as well, and get back also into some of the history and the prehistory of beer for women too.
Perfect. All right, so that Ladies' Night in the Cassie Brew event taking place Thursday, September the 22nd, I believe, also up at Vancouver Island University. More details on those two events, again, led by Maria there and others, will be on NanaimoCraftBeerSociety.com, where you pick up your tickets. And again, Nanaimo Craft Beer Week coming up here on September 20th to 24th. Marie, we have to quickly wrap up here, but any more last things you'd like to say to the viewers about Craft Beer Week in Nanaimo?
Other than the fact that we have some amazing breweries and brewers here in Nanaimo, home brewers and the small brewers that we are just excited to share with you and have a good time with everyone. So
awesome.
Come on out.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Again, Dr. Maria Hopwood from Vancouver Island University, professor, also a home brewer and a big fan of beer. Hope to see you out at those events. Nanaimo Craft Beer Week at NanaimoCraftBeerSociety.com. Get more information there. And of course, cheers. Thanks for watching.